Okay, hey everybody, welcome to an episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. To have a really fun little episode for you guys, comparing what I didn't see coming. Yeah, the first Seiko Alpinist homage, and it's by a brand that does great homages, and they're even using a Seiko movement. So I think this will be a lot of fun. Of course, we're comparing it to the latest Seiko Prospex Alpinist, the return of the dial with the name on it. So very, very cool. This is the SPB505 versus the Milifortic S089 compass bezel sports watch. So, I mean, I don't think it's very hard to see that this is a very clear homage, but I will say it's not a clone. It's definitely far from a one-to-one reproduction. There are some differences, some that you may see very quickly, right? When you look down to the actual execution of the cathedral hands, when you look at that inner rotating compass bezel, and some things that are going to be a little bit more nuanced in terms of the differences. But either way, we're going to really dive into kind of just comparing these two, the theory behind each, kind of what they bring to the table, their places within the market, and of course the very notable differences between the two, work on our way towards a bottom line. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get these pieces in hand, and take a closer look. Okay guys, now the full reviews of each of these watches are already on the channel, so if you do want to get into deep details on either of these, I do suggest you do take a look. But let's go ahead and get these side by side. Check them out. Very nice. There, they both have a very similar colorway and of course a very similar design, but that is by design, at least from the Milifortic standpoint. But in terms of their dimensions, they're very similar. 39.5 millimeters in diameter, 12.8 millimeters thick versus 11.5 millimeters thick. I will say though, as you look at them, probably not going to really be able to see the difference there. Lug to lug, also 46.3 versus just a clean 46 millimeters. But one thing you'll also notice is that the cases are not exactly the same. Look at the contouring on the side of the real deal. It is much more rounded and contoured versus here it's going to be just a bit of a more simple, not quite a slab side because there is some curvature to it, but you can see it is quite different and definitely a bit plain by comparison, which would make sense because you are saving some production and design the levels of finishing are going to be a little bit easier to do when you have a less contoured surface. You're missing the little dimple there, of course, on the other crown, but this crown is signed and this one is not, because that's just not something that Seiko does with screw down crowns anymore. Another thing that you're going to notice is just, from just the actual execution standpoint, look at this dial. It's a lot more readable, and that is because the indices are actually a matted color instead of a high polish. Here, this high polish is great, looks very cool, a bit more traditional, but I will say, of course, reflecting off of a black camera lens, it's going to be more hit or miss for the video. In real life, if you're reflecting it off of not a dark studio, then you're going to be able to see it fine. But here, it's just a little bit more versatile, and it's going to give you more visibility. Also, you're going to notice that the sun ray effect is a bit different. You can see it's a little bit more chocolatey. There's a warmer hue here versus this is more of a clean, anthracite gray there. Also, you can notice that a bit more dynamic in terms of the sunray effect here, where you're going to have more of a darkened section with just a bright sliver, whereas here you're going to get more of the bright sections. Once the light hits it, it's going to again light up just a little bit more. So those are just some little minor differences. Also, look at the sloped bezel there, the internal turning bezel, quite different actually when it comes to the design. I'd say one is making a little bit more of an effort to be extra legible, whereas the other, of course, just more within the traditional vein that you've seen of alpinists of this ilk in the past. Also, I will say for the action, very easy to turn, this compass bezel here, even by accident. So to a fault, versus here, it's going to be a bit more deliberate. It actually has a nice amount of resistance to it. So I will say that is something. Again, because of the beauty of doing an homage, you get to make tweaks, and you start off with an existing formula, and you can tweak it any way that you want and add your own spin, versus this being a long evolution over time and various iterations. Also, you're going to have hard coating. In terms of this, it has the Dia Shield hard coat versus no hard coating here. Now, the movement inside also different. You're going to get the 6R55, which has a 3-day, 72-hour power reserve, beats at 3 hertz or 21,600 vibrations per hour. And then on this side, you have the automatic Seiko Instruments NH35, which is going to still have a 3 hertz beat rate, but it's only going to have a 41-hour power reserve. So just short of 2 days versus here, a full 3-day power reserve. So that's quite nice. Also, you're going to have, again, with that extra thinness, probably due to that solid case back, versus here, you're going to have a display case back, which does have the very cool Alpinist logo across. So I think that is a nice touch. And again, they did slim this model down versus the last round of SPB modern Prospex Alpinists that didn't have the branding on them. And some of you might be thinking, hey, why would you even compare these? It should be a no-brainer. Guys, you know how many people complain about Seiko? It can't be a no-brainer to just not get this. I love Seiko. I collect Seiko, but realistically, there's a lot of people that are quite unhappy and feel like this is quite polarizing. So this might be right up their alley. People complain about the X on. I mean, it's literally the Prospex X. It's the most symmetrical letter in the alphabet. At least top 3. Okay, before you get down and tell me that a lowercase L or an I or a better, would have been looking better. I feel like there's nothing wrong with an X. Come on, but people don't like that, so there's no X on this dial. So yeah, maybe that's one less thing for people to be upset about. Also, I will say, with their expertise, look at how nice and large that date window is, thanks to the magnifying Cyclops here. It magnifies perfectly and it fills the space, and you can actually see that it is beautifully framed now as well in terms of a printed frame, but it doesn't magnify as large, so that's something there. I think that's kind of neat to see that. Again, this still has some tricks up its sleeve. They're both using sapphire with an NAR coating, etc. So there are some things that are the same. Now, there is an $811 difference between these two. $995 retail. I actually picked this one up from the team over at thewatchconnection.com in Costa Mesa, California. So big shout out to Noah from their team for hooking me up with the best pricing available on this piece. Typically, you're not going to have to pay full price for a Seiko, but still, MSRP to MSRP, $995. Versus here with the S089 goes for $184 direct from Milifortic. So yeah, that's a pretty big gap. Dimensions, again, slightly thinner and shorter lug to lug, which I think most people would probably appreciate. But also some of the differences is, you have double the water resistance, 200 meters versus 100 meters. Do you need 100? Not really. Also, for the power reserve, you're getting 3 days versus, less than 2 days power reserve. And then you're getting a hard coating and a stainless steel bracelet that's also hard coated. Here, you're just going to get a rubber strap that is actually quite nice and very usable, but there's that, right? In terms of heritage, of course, Seiko is the horological powerhouse that invented and continues to refine the Alpinist DNA creatively, while Milifortic have the luxury of being able, to pretty much take a now beloved formula and add their own spin based off of their own priorities, while also being able to do it at a massive discount. So yeah, you know, that's that. But with that said, I'm sure you're probably thinking these probably wear similar. They do. So we'll get them on the wrist and let's show you that. Okay, as you can see on my 7.5 inch wrist, or 19 centimeters in circumference, there, that this does fit very well, I think. And just like you'd expect for a 39.5, it does have a compass bezel, which does shrink down the dial a bit. Of course, these are non-contrasting, so depending on the angle you're going to look at it, it might look a little bit larger. Of course, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the camera, it's going to add a fair amount of perspective distortion, and you're going to see my wrist, kind of the sides of it, fall off, and it's going to get that 3D pop, which is going to also make the watch seem larger. So what I'll do is keep my wrist nice and low, and then just tighten up the frame like so that you guys can get still a detailed look, but just add a bit of a true aspect ratio as to how this may lay on your own wrist. And you can see lays quite beautifully. And same goes for this little guy right here. Yeah. Of course, I am a bracelet wearer. I do love a good strap, but I'm default setting to a bracelet, and this one does the job. Absolutely. No, it's not the most advanced. It's not, you're not buying the watch for the bracelet. And if you do find watches you're buying for the bracelet, maybe you're a bracelet fan as well. Maybe even more of a bracelet fan than a watch fan. I have had great watches with less great bracelets. I've never went out and said, oh, I need to have a watch because the bracelet is just so good. It's just not really how it works for me. But you guys can see these look really, really great. But we'll go ahead and now get these back off the wrist, set for some Lume shots, low light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. All right. Both pretty decent. Neither of them quite what I'd consider Lume Beast, but I think you can see that the Seiko Lume Bright is performing at a higher capacity with similar application. You could also say, sure, that maybe the Seiko has better applied Lume as well, but I think it's, you know, probably more so like the compound here, and then as a, you know, 1A compound, 1B application. So with that said, one thing I always like to work in is going to be a bit of a low light transition, because you know it's going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it's nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes run alike in less than optimal lighting. And you can see the Lume again, especially considering the application there's not a lot of you know, surface area that's loomed, but it's working quite well. But you guys can see here the difference in these dials. Look at that, how the light just gets absorbed. So legibility wise, they really keyed in, you know, for the Prospex Alpinist to make sure this was going to be a much more legible experience than it has been in the past. Versus here, you can see not as much thinking about that on the Milifortic side. It was, again, going by an existing winning formula and not really having anything to iterate because they haven't been making these. This is their first try at this formula. And it is a winning formula, so I can see why some people would just pick this up without a second thought. But again, there are some benefits that did come with a cost in terms of modern pricing, you know, with that more modern updated movement as well. But I think they both look great and do the job. So let's go ahead and even get the lights back going here so we can close this out. So for me, guys, bottom line here, yes, a genuine Seiko Alpinist is the right answer, but that doesn't necessarily make the Milifortic the wrong one, to be honest. Maybe you're just testing the waters before investing into the real deal, right? And I've considered that for various homages, right? Maybe you want to try the difference between a 36 and a 39 millimeter you know, oyster case before you spend a lot of money. Or maybe you want to see if this is a watch you would wear when you're not as much worried about what's going to happen to the watch, right? Especially at under $200 for the Milifortic. So there's a lot of different reasons. And yeah, just before you invest into the real deal, whether it's a very full-on luxury watch like a Rolex Explorer one, or something like this from Seiko with the Alpinist, which has its own heritage. It's nice to kind of have that, just that extra bit of confirmation or way to test the waters. Is this a use case or a watch that you would wear over multiple occasions, right? There's no point in having a do-it-all watch if you don't want to wear it in most occasions. And sometimes, or maybe you just need a backup watch to your existing Alpinist, right? Or within your Alpinist collection. Or, you need a beater watch with a little extra style. Why not take advantage if it's a watch you plan to, again, use as a beater? And with this robust rubber strap, I think you easily could use this as a straight up tool watch. To be honest, in the right circles, a Seiko Homage might even be more interesting to discuss than the real thing, especially with how polarizing some collectors have found the brand Seiko to be as of late. Where, I would say there's, I've been through the comment sections of my videos and other videos that I watch. There are a lot of people that are unhappy with Seiko. Me personally, I think a lot of those folks are unhappy with Seiko because they didn't really understand what Seiko was. People have been fans of a price point, of a value proposition that didn't define the brand. It was literally set up by watches that were 10, 15, 20 years into overproduction, and you were getting, amazing deals, especially for Japanese domestic the Japanese domestic market only models that were also being able to take advantage of gray market prices. And then the benefit also of the yen rate exchange, where you were getting huge discounts for watches. And that kind of defined for a lot of people what the brand was, although they've always had a huge line and all of these other things. They've sold expensive watches for years and years and years. You just didn't know about them, and you sure didn't care about them. But now that Seiko has had this resurgence into mainstream as well as enthusiast circles, more people are finding these references that they love, and they're figuring, oh yeah, guys, in the 90s, Rolex Submariners were cheap. They were just used. They weren't classic. They weren't neo-vintage. You could just get them for more affordable prices. Does that somehow mean that today's Rolex is terrible and they've lost their way and all these narratives that people want to spin? Whatever makes you feel better about not getting a watch that clearly you want because you're out watching videos and commenting about it. Sure, there are watches that I can't afford. Seiko's not one of them. They're nicer watches, I think, are still attainable, but you really have to have a love for them to collect them. And honestly, and I like to wear them. So I like to buy watches that are wearable. So, some watches like the older Marine Masters, they're just not that wearable. The Alpinist has always been a very wearable watch that I have enjoyed. And I have my own collection of other Alpinists, and they're great. I enjoy them a lot, but I will say this one, although the others have very unique characters, special editions, special dials, special setups and bracelets and straps and all the goodies, this one that kind of does it all, it wants to get worn, and that's how you enjoy watches, by wearing them. So, as much as I enjoy having a good watch roll full and a watch box full of watches that I love from a collecting standpoint, I get the most satisfaction out of the watches that compel me to wear them. And the Seiko Alpinist is one of those watches. And I do think that the Milifortic, although not better by any means than the real deal, it does a decent enough job. And I can't really get too mad at it. So with that said, let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you like the video, please like, and if you're already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.